Hi, welcome to CCUA's Kitchenside Chats. Today is another Wednesday edition, and today we are going to be talking all about fresh herbs. So as you can see, I don't normally have all my herbs in the kitchen, but I have brought all my herbs kind of inside so we can talk all about fresh herbs. And I wish you could smell it because it smells absolutely amazing. I never normally bring in all my plants like this, so the room really smells so good right now. So maybe I should do this all the time. So today we're going to do a little spotlight on fresh herbs, but particularly how to preserve them for the winter. So unfortunately, herbs do not stay during the winter here in Missouri. So if you have like herb plants like these, most of them will go dormant in the winter. So that's sad because I do love myself some fresh herbs, but the good thing about it is there are many ways to preserve them so that we can enjoy them through the winter and they still taste super fresh. Or you can preserve them and dry them yourself and give them away as gifts, make your own rubs, make your own herb blends. So it really is the gift that keeps on giving. The nice thing about these fresh herbs is that they're so inexpensive. So like for instance, I ordered a couple from Happy Hollow this year and a couple from Victory Gardens. And they were between $2 and $5, which seems really reasonable because like for the instance, this chocolate mint, I have been enjoying this chocolate mint when I ordered it in May all the way through the season. I've made tea, I've made salads, and now I'm gonna start drying all this delicious chocolate mint because through the summer or through the winter, I'm gonna hopefully brew this and make some delicious tea. Maybe I'll add it to brownies and make some chocolate mint chocolate brownies, things like that. So it really is the one, I think, one of the things you can grow that really is a big bang for your buck if you like to cook with herbs. I think, I think this was $3 or $4. I've been eating it all summer. I've enjoyed it in many dishes. I've put it in popsicles. I put them in smoothies. Things like this pineapple sage, I have put that in with meat dishes, different things. I'm definitely going to be drying it, making some tea with it. Rosemary. If anybody has bought like fresh rosemary at the store, you know that it's a little bit expensive to buy. And if you have to buy those little plastic containers of fresh rosemary for a recipe, it can run you $3, $4. So this way, if you're buying your rosemary, and I actually have my rosemary and my parsley together, but if you're buying your rosemary, I think I bought this from Happy Hollow, and they even have still the little Happy Hollow sign. But I spent $2.99 on this rosemary, and I love rosemary. I've been putting it in quiches, in salads, and now I'm going to dry it and use it this winter in stews and soups with my roast, with some mushrooms and make like a rosemary mushroom gravy. So really, if you ever buy fresh herbs, you really will save a bundle if you start growing them yourself. Now, I am no expert on growing things, but that is where Carrie and Tony have some amazing videos. Carrie, back in the spring, did a great video all about how to grow herbs in containers, as well as just like herb, Q&A, just different questions that people have about herbs. And the reason why I think fresh herbs mean so much to me is because they're the first thing that I ever by myself when I always thought I had a black thumb and I never thought I could grow anything. We lived in California at the time, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I have killed cactuses. So the thought of growing something, 7, 8 years ago, I just thought I have a black thumb, I can't do it. And so when I first started getting my own herbs and growing them in a container like this, I started putting them right by the door, right? So when I enter the house, I see them and I can give them all the attention they need. I started kind of reading up about it. And if I can grow fresh herbs, you can. I promise you. In my opinion, I think it's such a great thing to start with. And if you like to cook with fresh herbs, which I did, and I was just so sick of spending so much money on those little container of fresh herbs, this is the way to go. So anyway, sorry, I'm just really excited. I love a good fresh herb. So I wanted to just talk about, since it's the end of summer and all of our herbs are doing great, let's go ahead and kind of talk about the different ways that we can preserve them. And I'm going to show you some ways today. I feel like I'm in like a jungle right now with all my plants in here. Okay, so let's see. I talked all about why I like fresh herbs and why I like cooking with them. Something I wanted to mention. You dry your herbs, like I dried this rosemary last year. This is a gift. So here's the rosemary. If you get like a nice decorative bottle to put it in like this, you can give this to somebody and you can be like, this is homemade rosemary, because it really is. You grew it yourself, you dried it yourself, you know what you put on it. So as far as I know, I don't put chemicals on my herbs or anything. So put a little ribbon around this and you could definitely give this to somebody for Christmas, for their birthday, maybe a new neighbor. Same with like blends. So one of my coworkers, Katie, actually talks about making a chili powder blend from scratch. Now I know that's not a herb per se, but they take all their peppers from the garden, and I think she said that they sun dry them or they roast them, and they make like a blend, and then they give it to people for Christmas. And I thought, wow, that's such a good idea. And not only is it just a homemade idea, it can be really effective if you'll have a lot of family to give presents to. And I just think it's really cool. So, something else I wanted to note is if you were to dry fresh rosemary, fresh sage, different things like that in a bundle, and we'll talk about all the ways to dry herbs here in a minute. I have seen people do this as fire starters when they're camping, especially in the fall. You can do a really nice fragrant fire starter with a bunch of dried sage or rosemary or mint or anything. And if you just have so much dried stuff, it really is nice in the fall, and it can give that fire a really fragrant smell. And you know that your herbs aren't being wasted. You're using them just in a different way than you typically would. So that's kind of a fun thing to do in the fall as well. Oh, and sage keeps the bugs away. So if you throw a little bit of dried sage into your fire, it is really good about keeping those bugs away. They don't like the smell, and I think it smells amazing. Okay, so we're going to go through the different ways you can dry your herbs. So the first way that I normally do is by taking your herbs, and you always wash them. So I cut them off and this is actually chocolate mint. So I cut them off and wash them, and then I'm going to keep them on the stem and everything. So I just cut them right out. It smells so good. I wish you could smell this. And you're going to take twine of some sort. This is cooking twine, but you can use anything you have. And you are just going to take the bottoms of those, and you are going to wrap it around and tie it pretty tightly. You need it to hold your herbs for 7 to 10 days while they're drying. So tie it pretty tightly, and again, anything you have will work. I mean, the only thing I think you wouldn't want to use would be floss or fishing line, because it might break. But you can use any kind of twine, string, anything you have at home is going to be fine. Okay, so there's that. Oh, and I missed one, but that's all right. We'll do that one later. So here's your little guy. So this is your herbs. And so something I want to is, you want to typically do something like this, but because as your herbs dry, you're going to start to lose leaves and things like that, you're going to want to either put it in like a brown paper sack, or put some sort of fabric or something around it, or maybe even underneath it, so that you're catching those leaves as they drop, because it is going to be 7 to 10 days, so it's going to take a while. And as they start to dry up, I like to do like a lunch sack. I have a bunch of these left over from a project, and they're really cheap. So I'm going to be really loud here in a minute when I start opening it. But basically, you're going to want to hang this sack or piece of fabric, or you could do cheesecloth or anything around your herbs. Unless you have a place animals, critters, kids can get to it, you could just leave a cookie sheet or something under it. And you're going to want to do this in kind of a dry, airy place. I have done it outside before under like a covered porch, or if you have a room that doesn't get a lot of natural sunlight, but still has a good airflow, you could do something like that. In like a closet or something like that. But again, you want to make sure you get enough airflow. And the reason why you don't want to put plastic over this is because it could mold or get mildewy. So definitely anything that breathes. Do this real quick, but it's going to be loud. Okay. Stuff that in there. Okay, I'm going to cut another piece of string, and I'm actually going to hang this outside underneath my porch, and I'm using this for tea. So this is a chocolate mint, and I'm going to use this for tea this winter, and maybe even like put it in some chocolate brownies, like a lot of those yummy comfort foods that we like to make in the winter. Okay, so there's that. So it's as simple as that. You're just going to hang this up. Again, you want to make sure you're getting enough airflow. You're going to want to make sure it's not getting direct sunlight. We don't want to singe this or anything. I wanted to mention that there are soft herbs and there are hard herbs, and mint, this is chocolate mint, is one of those soft herbs. So with soft herbs, we don't want to expose them to a lot of heat or anything like that because it will just not taste as good and it won't be as fresh tasting, especially like if we're using them in 6 months or so. So yeah, that's it. It's that easy. Hang it 7 to 10 days. I did want to mention something that you're looking for too when you get it out of your bag is you want the leaves to crumble, like almost like if you had corn chips or something like that, or like if you've watched any of my dehydration videos, we want it to crumble up immediately. As soon as you touch that stem, we want all those leaves to fall off. So that's when you know it's done. And then just store it. You can store it in a reusable bag. You can store it in a mason jar with a lid. We want to store it in an airtight container or some sort of a bag. And you can store it for up to a year, maybe even 2 years. Now, I'll tell you, mint in my house doesn't last that long because I love a mint tea in the winter, or any kind of herb that you're going to do. So with the hanging plants, any plant like mint, rosemary, sage, thyme, parsley, basil, and dill, those are all great to hang. Now the reason why, again, we like to hang these is because they're soft herbs, and they just do better when you don't expose them to heat, especially things like dill. We typically use dill raw. We don't normally cook with dill. Things like rosemary. Rosemary, obviously we do cook with it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in one of my other ways to preserve it, is a way that you can preserve it where you need to cook with it. But again, things like dill, mint, we don't typically cook with mint. You could probably, but those kind of things are going to be better just hanging to dry or not exposing them to high amounts of heat. So the second way would be to oven dry or dehydrate your herbs. And so we typically do this with the hard herbs. And the hard herbs are going to be sage, rosemary, and I know that rosemary is in both categories, and I'll explain why in a minute. Parsley, different things like that. So what you do is you take a cookie sheet and you're going to set your oven to 170 or the lowest temperature, or if you have a dehydrator, you can do this as well. You're going to take your cookie sheet and you're actually going to take all of your herbs and spread them out on the cookie sheet. I actually have my herbs in the oven right now at 170, so I'm going to get them out and we're going to look at them and see how they're doing. Ooh, they're looking really good. Okay, so I put, hopefully you can see this, I put parsley. So I did this about 40 minutes ago. I put parsley, pineapple sage, rosemary, and then thyme. So it's really interesting to see the parsley is still really, really green, but hopefully you can hear this. It's really, really crumbly. So it's interesting to see. So that parsley is a beautiful green color, but super crumbly, and honestly, I would say it's almost done. So that's the leaves, and they're just crumbling up like crazy. So here is our pineapple sage leaves. So those got brown super quickly, and they are super, hopefully you can hear this, they're super crumbly as well, and oh, it smells so good. So the rosemary, that kind of crumbled up just perfectly. So these are actually, I think they're mostly all done. So the rosemary, here's the stalk and then the leaves. Typically, you could take all the leaves off before you do this process, off of the stems, but I went ahead and left the stems because it's so easy once they're completely dried like this, just to easily snap all the leaves off. Hopefully you can see, but it was that easy because it's completely dry and there's our stem. Now, I do save all the stems from all my herbs and I will throw them into a veggie stock. So I have a reusable bag in my freezer, and I'll show you in a minute. And I throw all of my herbs, mushroom stems, carrot peels, anything like that. I throw them in that bag, and then when I make a veggie stock, I use all that goodness. So we're really not wasting it, and I don't have to feel too bad about it. So here's my stem. I'm going to set that over here. And then same with our thyme. So this one, hopefully you can hear this, is super dry. They're all super dry. So that was just 45 minutes in the oven at 170. And I only checked on them once. They say to typically check on them about every 30 minutes. Depending on how many herbs you're doing, it really depends on, again, how long it takes and things like that. And again, it was super easy for me to take all the leaves off the stem. And it smells so good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep drying these herbs, and then I'm going to make a blend. And there's this blend that I normally buy from Trader Joe's, but I'm going to try to make it myself this year. So it's a bunch of different herbs. It's lavender, it's parsley, it's oregano, it's thyme, and so I'm going to dry all these things and put them together and try to make my own blend this year. So you will want to be careful and never do this at night while you're sleeping or while you're not home. Even though the oven's at 170, we always want to really be careful just in case. So this is still a little bit hot, so I'm going to set it back over here and turn my oven off. Okay, so that is like as easy as that gets. So this one is like my favorite way to preserve herbs ever, and I wanted to share it because I think it's genius, and I wish I would have come up with it myself. So the oil freezer preserving method. So I don't know if a lot of you have seen online or seen on Pinterest that a lot of people are freezing herbs in ice cube trays with either olive oil or butter. You could do it in any kind of thing. I actually didn't have any extra ice cube trays because we don't have an ice maker, so we use ice cube trays for ice. So I didn't want to put any oil or anything in there. I did want to mention though, if you want to do something like this with a ton of herbs, I have seen ice cube trays at thrift stores, at yard sales for like 10 cents or a quarter. You could probably order them online or get them at Walmart. So if you do want to do something like this with a lot of herbs, keep your eyes peeled. That's definitely something that I think could really be interesting and easy to do. So what I did is I actually didn't have ice cube trays I wanted to use, but I had these little silicone cups that I cook in pretty often, and they're kind of a silicone muffin tin, and as you can see, they're really, really malleable. So I actually took these, and I'm going to pop my head in the freezer and see how they're doing. But I took the silicone cups, and I did the same kind of concept. So what we're going to do is you take your silicone cup, ice tray, container, whatever kind of thing you want to use, and you're going to put a little drizzle of olive oil at the bottom of it until you can kind of have a coating at the bottom. And then you're going to take any kind of herb that you want to use. Now again, for this, typically people use a hard herb. You're going to want to use an herb that you are going to cook with. So I wouldn't want to use like a mint unless I'm going to cook with it for some reason, or any of those softer herbs like a dill or anything like that. You're going to want to use a hard herb. So rosemary, parsley, thyme, oregano, basil you could use. I haven't had great luck with basil in the freezer, but hey, you want to try it, go for it. So you're going to take that, and then I'm going to go grab my muffin tins really quick. I want you to see kind of what I'm talking about. Okay, awesome. Well, these actually worked out really well. So I just froze these about 45 minutes ago. So I color coded them because I didn't want to forget which herbs. So this one is the thyme. This one is the pineapple sage. And this one is rosemary. I cook a lot with rosemary in the winter. There's just something about rosemary and the sage and all these different things in the winter with roasts and stews and potato curry and like all these just comforty foods. So I wanted to kind of show you. So this is what I do personally. If you use an ice cube tray, you could do the same thing. You could pop them out this way. You could use any kind of like Tupperware container. You even could use like a little Ziploc bag if you wanted to, like a reusable. But I'm going to show you. I'm going to pop this guy out. And I've only been frozen for 45 minutes. So yeah, they're not super frozen, but I'm just going to kind of show you what they look like. So it's typically going to be like a little puck. And again, I didn't do a ton because these are huge muffin cups. But this one is, that's the thyme. And it's like a little puck of olive oil and thyme. Hopefully you can see that. And so these are not quite frozen. I didn't give them enough time. But typically you're going to freeze them for 2 to 3 hours, get them really rock hard, and then you're going to pop them out of whatever you're using, and you're going to have these little cubes. You can also do this with butter. If you are on like keto or paleo, you'll want to do it with like a clarified butter, like a ghee. But if not, you could just do your regular old butter. I did want to say typically they say to use unsalted butter, but I did all of these with olive oil just because I cook with olive oil a lot. And like this one is your rosemary. And again, once you have these frozen completely, you're going to pop them out, and you can put them in like a mason jar or some sort of an airtight container, and you have all of your beautiful like little cubes or little discs of herbs. And then typically you want to mark them. So I would put like all my rosemary in one container, all my sage in one container, that kind of thing. Mark them out and put the date. So typically I have had good luck with using these within 6 months, just because they're in the freezer. You don't want them to start getting freezer burn or start having that kind of that weird freezer taste. I have heard and read online that people can use these up to a year. So again, it's totally up to you, but I just love this way. If I'm cooking something in the Instapot in the winter, I could just take one of these cubes and just throw it right in. And it really does taste super fresh, just like it's the summer. But again, I won't have my herbs in the winter. So this is just a really good way to save your herbs. And yeah, so It's that easy. I did want to say something I read online just recently, and I kind of wish I would have had time to do it today, was I read that you can preserve your herbs in salt. And I thought this was fascinating. So I haven't dug into this yet. But if anybody has a chance, and if you have ever preserved herbs in salt, please tell me below. I'd love to know about that, and I'd love to try it out myself as well. So I just thought this was super interesting. And the whole idea is that you would stick your herbs. They talked about rosemary in particular. And you would take a bunch of your stems of rosemary, and you would take, it talked about using like kosher sea salt. You would fill like a mason jar with kosher sea salt, stick all your herbs in there, and then keep filling it with the kosher sea salt. And it said day by day, as the herbs start to like kind of break down in a way, you're going to want to keep putting more and more salt and store it in the refrigerator. And it said you could do this for up to a year, which I thought was super interesting. So not only did it talk about using the herbs and that it really is in the fridge with the salt, it's good about preserving it so you can use it. And it says it tastes super fresh up to a year. Again, I haven't tried this, but I was super intrigued by it. And then here's the thing I thought was super interesting. It says when you're cooking with these herbs, because of the salt content, you don't have to put salt in your dishes. And you can also use that salt to cook with. And it could be like a rosemary salt, or it could be like an oregano salt. And I was like, wow, this is super cool. So if anybody's tried this method before, please tell me below. Tell me how it turned out and kind of what you do. And I'm going to try this method, and I'm going to report back because I think it's super intriguing. And the idea of giving someone like a rosemary lemon, salt, or like a bee balm salt or something like that to cook with could be really, really a fun gift. You could put it in kind of a pretty little container. And I think it would be not only a fun gift, but really delicious and just really comforting in the winter. So anyway, thanks so much for watching today's Kitchen Side Chat. Again, my name is Tamara Maddox, and I work for CCUA. Please check out all of our videos, all of our content on our website, Columbia Center for Urban Ag, columbiaurbanag.org. And check that out. And right now we are trying to raise $10,000 just because we're trying to let everyone know what we're doing here in the community. And with COVID, everybody needs help right now. So if you could help us by donating, that would be really, really appreciated. And we will put your money to work. So thank you so much and have a great day. If you have any topics that you want to learn about, please let us know. Thanks again.